Hello there. This video is a bit of an explainer for you that's based around a couple of different things. First of all, it's an election year, which means we're going to see a whole bunch of misinformation, disinformation, dog whistles put out there by opposition MPs, by MPs who are not in opposition, by people who want to be MPs, and by idiots who have no idea what the hell they're talking about. So the explainer is to basically try and work out what the actual truth of the situation is, because very few things are as simple as these posts and these commentaries and these individuals like to make out. Now, it does tie in as well a little bit to my Substack newsletter, which you can go and subscribe to for free. There's a link. I'll put one in the description. There's also one, I think, in the corner up here somewhere on the main page. Either way, you can go and check it out now. Super easy, totally free. Sign up, get that into your inbox. Today, we're going to be talking about potholes. So let's start off with the really basic facts. Yeah, potholes are pretty bad at the moment. Waka Kotahi have even turned around and said that they've had a massive increase in the number of complaints around potholes, and some wannabe local body politicians have even started using potholes as their way of trying to build an audience to go out and get people to vote for them at probably the next local body election. And in the meantime, they're campaigning against things like road safety features for cyclists. But we'll get to that a little bit later. The important thing to remember here, though, is that while the National Party is able to sit there and go, we gave you roads of national significance, we're the party of roads, and this government does not like roads or road users, that's kind of bullshit right now. There's a couple of ways that we can look at this and see just how much of a dog whistle it actually is. First of all, it's really important to separate the fact that Waka Kotahi is in charge of some roads and your local, regional, or district or city councils are in charge of other roads and access points that vehicles use. And they're not ones that go hand in hand. Sometimes they work together, sometimes they don't. But to lump them all under one group, that's not going to work because that's not how it works. That is a very important thing to remember. The other thing that we need to look at is how much funding has actually gone into things like road repairs, because the stats on those are actually pretty easy to find. Now, looking at this particular graph here, you'll see that there are significant increases in the funding to our road networks whenever we have a Labour government in power, and it's not uncommon for a National Party government to just hold back on giving those excess fundings. If you look really specifically, though, at the period of the John Key government, there was a couple of really big changes that came into play there that meant that there should have been significant increases in funding. That didn't happen. And part of the reason that we're paying the price for it now is because the amount of funding stayed static for a very long period of time. But in that period of time, the National Party underwent its roads of national significance build process without increasing the funding to make sure that the roads were maintained. An Auditor General report out in 2013 actually pointed out that the amount of money spent on roads needed to be increased, or you're effectively halving the budget that was going to maintaining and keeping up existing roading networks. But the National Party didn't do that. On top of that, the National Party also introduced legislation that allowed heavier loaded trucks on the road, 9 tons heavier than what was previously allowed. And it makes sense in that they wanted to make sure that you could move transport around, that it was easier to move larger loads, that kind of thing. Why would you use things like trains to do that? But this is what their focus was on. But by increasing the amount of weight that goes on a road, you increase the speed with which that road breaks down. There's been research done on this over many, many years to find out exactly what was going on and how fast these things break down. Your average car on one trip of road creates as much damage as your average bicycle does on 160,000 trips on that same piece of road because the weight differential is so big. And when you add something like 9 tons, you actually create something called the rule of fours. Essentially, every axle that you've got on that vehicle increases the amount of damage 4 times based on the amount of weight that it's carrying. Like, it's all complicated in maths, and maths isn't my thing. These decisions, though, really led to a major decrease in the quality of our roads, but these things don't happen fast. They don't happen straight away. And while we are seeing significant investment now in the roads to fix these problems still pop up. But there's also another slightly more problematic thing that's causing these issues, and that's water. Did you know that 2022 was one of the record years for wetness around Aotearoa? That's a weird way to phrase it, but I'm going to stick with it. In 18 regions, it was the wettest ever recorded, and for the first near 2 weeks of 2023, it has just been raining constantly. And water, well, it's really patient when it comes to wearing things down and causing us problems. And what it does is it actually gets in under the roading and washes away the stuff that the roading is built up on. It causes potholes, sinkholes, and I don't know, a virus on Mars if you watch Doctor Who. There is actually a reference to that in the Substack email. It's kind of weird, but sort of apt. Water is hugely damaging, which means that the budget that had been put in place for repairing things, while it's certainly more than it was, still needs to stretch a little bit further because there's a whole bunch of unforeseen damage that was not expected thanks to just how wet things have been. I wanted to make a joke about Simeon Brown here, but no, Simeon Brown and things getting wet just don't really seem to fit in my head. Now, let's also not forget that we have got massive roadworks underway over the summer period this year. And the reason for that is because roading that's done in the summer lasts longer. Things set better, you don't have as much movement come in from the rain. The stuff they do during winter is basically stopgap measures, but the stuff that they do over the summer is large scale and long term. And it's really common. In fact, news headlines from 2023, 2022, 21, 20, 2015, 2013, and 2012 all say exactly the same thing. This is going to be the summer of roadworks, because that's just how these things roll. So there you have it. The fact that our roads have potholes are from a whole range of different factors, very little of which is actually down to the current government and what they've done to try and fix the problem. It's incidental environmental factors as well as years of neglect under the previous government in trying to get that sorted. Not just neglect, but actively doing things that damage roads faster. So when you see somebody like Simeon Brown get up and complain and talk about potholes, he's very deliberately doing that to dog whistle. Now, the other factor that comes into play here very briefly are people who are using this as a way of trying to increase the amount of cars on the road while minimizing other road users, like Jeff Upson here, who is very, very vocal about the need to remove safety features put in place specifically for Auckland cyclists around roads because he considers it dangerous for cars. Whereas what we've seen already with all the science and the maths, and I'm going to assume calculus, I was never any good at that in high school, is that the amount of damage that we're seeing on the physical road coming from a car is significantly more than from a bicycle. But what we see when we don't have safety features in place for cyclists, that has a far more tragic ending. These little safety features don't actually damage the road anywhere near as much as telling people to drive more does.